Glad to know you're still with us. Now, let's delve into Nigeria's judicial and education sector and rate how it has fared, especially under this administration in the past 7 years, and also look at it from independence, 1960 till now. We have joining us Jide Ologun, a legal practitioner. Thank you for joining us and happy independence.
Thank you. I wish you the best going forward in Nigeria from this 60-second point. Thank you.
Now, a lot of people would say that right now there is really nothing happy about the Independence Day celebration. But let's dovetail this down to the education sector and judiciary. Let's start with the education sector. President Muhammad Buhari, in his 62nd Independence Day speech, said, called on ASU for the opting time to go back to the classrooms. What are your thoughts? How would you assess this administration's performance in the area of education?
You know, realistically, this administration has done poorly in giving education its right of place, particularly if developing the nation is on the agenda board. Because what happened recently is that the federal government went to court, the National Industrial Court, and the court gave an interlocutory injunction, which is just like, okay, this matter is still on, but in the interim, go back. And it was expressed to be in national interest. But I asked a question at that point in time. Even if the lecturers go back to the classrooms, will that solve the fundamental problems we have? Because the demand of ASU is for the revitalization of the university system, to bring it at par with what we have in foreign countries in terms of attracting lecturers, attracting students, and delivering value to students here and parents who send their children to school in Nigeria. Then talking about the payment system, talking about the end allowances, and the government also said, okay, you've been on strike since February, it's a policy of no work, no pay, which of course is a global policy. And have we fully utilized the alternative dispute resolution opportunities we have? The answer is, in fact, before going to court, the federal government set up a committee. So you now see a desperate situation. Even when the federal government gave the vice chancellors the directive that they should order the lecturers to go back to the classroom, it was withdrawn. So we have a confusion. Now let's go to the fundamentals. What are the issues here? There was an agreement in 2009, I suppose, to inject about 1.3 trillion naira into that system, out of which about 200 billion naira has been released. There has been this back and forth. And in HR, you talk of collective bargaining. There has been bargainings. And the position of ASU is that you need to keep your promises. And now, before even going to court, the federal government said, we give you 150 billion naira in 2023 budget. You know, the budget that is expected to arrive as a deficit budget, out of which about 6.3 trillion naira they go for fuel subsidy. So how do you fulfill your promise? And again, let's go to the public relations angle. In communicating, you must be building bridges. At the time, in response, a minister of state said the federal government could not go and borrow to pay ASU. And yet, ASU is watching the same federal government buying executive vehicles for a foreign nation, you know, playing the big brother. Some will argue that that is a diplomatic issue. Fine. But if your roof is leaking, it's not the time to paint the walls. You go and fix that roof, then you paint the walls later. So we need to prioritize. But by and large, if you look at the effect of all this on education in Nigeria, we have depleted education, and no nation develops ignoring education. You know, I mean, let's face it. I was reading a report that disturbed me so much. In the course of this strike, about 21 lecturers reportedly died in Cross River State. Many lecturers have left Nigeria. The president of the ASU, or chairman, was telling us many more are going to leave because there is no law that says they cannot see greener pasture. So you find a nation now with brilliant human resources losing these human resources to foreign nations who appreciate them more. I was in Connecticut in the USA. I visited St. Joseph's University, where my in-law, leads the pharmacology department. You need to see what this man has done for the US. And he's well taken care of. And he was a lecturer in Ahmadu Bello University. So there are many like that. There are many medical doctors. I don't want to tell you the number of nurses that left this country for the UK in the last 2 years. In fact, I got a shocking report, and we may go and check it out. I think the report is dated 3rd of July 2017 or thereabout, where the Vice President of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, then acting president, revealed that Nigerians spend about 129.6 or thereabout billion naira annually for education in the UK. That is disturbing. He was insinuating that some wealthy Nigerians do not pay tax to the government, that they pay so much to educate their children. But how many of us are not guilty? As we was on strike, the Speaker of the House of Representatives came out with a picture in Harvard. The First Lady of Nigeria was showing us the picture of her daughter-in-law graduating from the UK. You see, so
and in the midst of all of this, we see that the number of out-of-school children has shot up to 20 million. As of last year, it was still 10 million.
See, that may be a fulfillment of an agenda. When Boko Haram started around 2000 and 2002, I was one of those who started shouting that, hey, go and engage these people, because if a group came up to say we are against Western education, they are against civilization, they are against development. So when you talk of out-of-school children, for some, they cannot be bothered. And when they have the alternative of sending their own children to school effectively, why should they be concerned? And that is why some of us are driving the advocacy for good governance. So children out of school, and you are talking about children out of school. That's just one of the numerous problems we have. Recently, I heard that a liter of kerosene is 900 naira.
Yes.
So I don't know how to digest that. And the one I use, my wife told me she went buying 2 cylinders, refilling 2 cylinders of gas for 19,000 naira. I just kept quiet, because that is more than half of minimum wage in Nigeria. So just to cook, and I don't want to bore us with how much you pay for electricity, so but I can just summarize by letting us know that the inflation rate is about 20.5% now. Unemployment about 33.3%. The total indebtedness of Nigeria about 46 trillion. And it was 12.12 trillion in March 2015. So we need help. I don't want to say we're in trouble because it doesn't appear that we are in trouble from the way our leaders parade themselves, because it is well with them on that side,
Okay, let's talk about, the issue of brain drain you talked about within the education sector, about, certain lecturers leaving. In the course of this, industrial action by ASU, 21 lecturers have died already. There's several others that have left. What's the effect of, or the impact this will have on the education sector, even if ASU resumes work, say, Wednesday or tomorrow, Tuesday, 4th of October? How well are students in terms of having, good lecturers that would equip them with the needed knowledge that they deserve or need? Absolutely,
it will have a negative impact, because lecturing is not just a physical thing. It's psychological, it's emotional, it's something that requires passion, and of course it's going to affect what is delivered to the students. And of course there are complaints about that. We're even talking about the lecturers. What about the students? Right now many parents are traumatized because their children have come up to say, Daddy, Mommy, I don't need education to succeed in life. Because you have unplugged them from that system. Many are mounting pressure on their parents. I need to travel abroad. Somebody in my school, the father has taken him abroad, whether he or she has parents that are politicians or not. You see, so parents themselves are going through pressure. And there is one on the lighter mode. Children eat more when they are idle. So, and it's a serious crisis. Maybe when you are in school, if you are serious, you may remember to eat twice. Some do say 001, all those. But when they are at home, they eat round the clock. I don't blame them. And within the economy, right now, if you, a decent loaf of bread slice is about 1,050 naira. So if you have 4 children at home and they open that bread, they can be sure that in 5 minutes, 1,050 is gone. So you multiply that by 30 days on bread alone. So there are pressures. And the government, again, has not been able to deny the fact that we have challenges. But how do we start approaching them? You see, I listened to the address of the president on the Independence Day, and I was amazed by a revelation that came out. We always say, maybe by default, that in the midst of scarce resources, Nigeria is not one of the nations suffering from scarce resources. Our problem is mismanagement of overflowing resources, and I believe we've started discussing independence now.
Exactly.
Because Malaysia left, Singapore left Malaysia in 1965 with little resources, and today, by investing in education and building, strong structures and system, Singapore is one of the best countries to live and work in the world, because what Lee Kuan Yew did was to develop the people, a strong civil service sector, create security in that environment, enabled environment for businesses. And you see the big brands of the world coming in to do business there. And you see there are different levels of wealth creation and sustenance. The local wealth creation, that we attract the foreign wealth. We call it foreign direct investment. I think Ghana is benefiting so much from that in West Africa. And the UAE is also benefiting massively, because if you are a big brand in this world, you are not doing business in the UAE, you need to check your...
But talking about investments in education, we've seen that there's been a lot of lip service when it comes to the budgetary allocation. For instance, this year was about 7%, and over the years we've seen below 10%, allocation to education. Are we really serious about meeting up with the UN standard of about 20%, dedicated to education?
We are not serious. I heard a report this morning that the budgetary allocation for fuel subsidy is greater than the aggregate budgetary allocation for education, defense,
health,
and health.
Yes.
So if you ask me what seriousness is in that, I don't know. And I spoke about resources that we have in abundance. We have been reading about oil theft. Who are the thieves stealing our oil? Section 14, subsection 2B of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended says that the security and the welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. So, and when we talk about security, we talk about food security, the fiscal security, economic security. So, are we now saying that we have another government of criminals who steal our oil and they are untouchable? It's amazing. I was, monitoring the profile of my president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Very impressive. I think he joined the military in 1963.
Yep.
When we became a republic. So he's gone through the whole system. And having gone through the value chain, his promise to clamp down on insecurity should have been fulfilled. And that brings us to another critical issue that we cannot deny today, which is the issue of absence of unity. And the motto of Nigeria says unity, peace, and unity, faith, peace, and progress. And that means without unity, the faith in the project Nigeria will not be there. And if that faith is not there, there will not be peace. If there is no peace, how can progress come? So these are the several issues that we have right now.
Okay, just before we delve into judicial matters, we'll go on a break now. When we return, we'll wrap up the conversation about education. Jide Ologun is still here with us. Please stay with us. The conversation still continues with Jide Ologun regarding the state of education and the judiciary in Nigeria, even at this occasion of our 62nd independence. Just, before that break, I was about asking, to conclude, discussion regarding the education sector, For all of these challenges, especially our tertiary, education, how can we, get out of this mess? So, what are the viable solutions, to bring Nigeria back to that place of reckoning in terms of education?
Firstly, the government must keep faith with the promises and try to resolve the issue of ASU, not palliatively. Then secondly, can we look at the fact that some private tertiary institutions are doing very well? So how are they coping? Can we begin to look at partnership? Or if some can take over some of these institutions and build them up, and can we now also begin to look for those who may be able to invest and take over? But even before we start looking at that, can we work on the state of insecurity in this country? When you have an enabling environment, it's easier for you to resolve your crisis. And can I address the National Assembly? Section 4 of the Nigeria Constitution 1999 as amended says that the National Assembly shall make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of Nigeria. That we make laws that political appointees, public officers, cannot send their children abroad. Let's all be here. They will be compelled.
But wouldn't that be impeding their rights to mobility or movement?
Then we remain where we are now. It's a possibility. If you study China, at a point in time, nobody wanted, let me say few people wanted to touch a Chinese product. Even here in Nigeria, the moment you hear made in China, fake. China went into isolationism. All things are possible.
That those who would argue that that's, because they operate in a communal system in terms of communism as against democracy that we have here.
When I was studying public relations, I learned something in class, that let fools argue. All systems of government are good. It depends on what works for you. Lee Kuan Yew did not practice democracy. He practiced authoritarianism. That Singapore must develop. And he turned Singapore from a third world country to a first world country. There is a whole book on it. I read the magic wands of what he did. Meritocracy, studying the successful templates around the world and improving on them. So we have practiced military rule in Nigeria. We have practiced democracy. We are almost practicing militarized democracy, because right now you need military to provide security in the land. So it's not about the system of government. What system of government is adopted in Saudi Arabia? They are prosperous. They are enjoying their oil wealth. What system of government do we have in the UAE? So these are issues. It's not about the template. We know that globally the world is frowning at military rule and stuff like that. But if you are serious-minded, sir, you will make your system to work for you. It's just that we have not come to that point where there is accountability, where there is transparency, where there is integrity, some key elements in good governance.
But those who you are saying should legislate are the main beneficiaries of this system.
Exactly. And that's the problem. But you know where we are going now. And, the 1978 Mexican statement about public relations says it's the art and social science of monitoring trends and predicting their consequences and recommending what can be done to clients. You see, we are beginning to experience some things in this country. Look at the attack on a senator in the East recently. Yes. Many of his security aides were taken out. He escaped because he was in an armored vehicle. And we thank God for his life and sympathize with the families of those who were killed. It may come to a point where some citizens begin to perceive the government as enemies, government players as enemies. And if they cannot carry out aggregate attack, because government can clamp down on protests and things like that, they may begin to carry out, specific targets, which will be dangerous. And that leads me to my big question. So when you live as a senator, are you going to live in an armored community of your own? The big question we should be asking when we have the opportunity of being in this: when I live here, where am I going? What kind of society am I returning to? Okay, so you now buy armored toothbrush, armored vest, armored bed. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So let's fix this country. What are we talking about? Generate commonwealth for common good. Okay. We have the largest deposit of proven gas in Africa. We have gold in Zamfara that can earn that state at least about $2 billion annually. Yeah. So what are we talking about?
Let's turn our attention now to the judiciary. I mean, it's been a journey over the last 62 years from the controversial 1979 Supreme Court verdict of 12 and a half or 12 2/3 as it were, down to the 2015-2016 raid on Supreme Court justices and various allegations of bribery and corruption among others. What's your overview of the state of the judiciary over the last 62 years?
The judiciary has come of age, before 1963, yes, when we became a republic. After the Supreme Court, you could appeal to the Privy Council, the Judicial Council, the Privy Council in Britain. So now Supreme Court is the highest. And we've gone through the storms, and most recently there was a shake-up in the Supreme Court when there were allegations of high-handedness against the former CJ who was eased out of office. And some of us are still of the view that those allegations could have been kept low. And a highly respected jurist said justice must not only be done, but clearly seen to have been done. By and large, we've tried in Nigeria. All the sectors are troubled, and we just need to keep on fine-tuning our processes. So no arm of government is exempted from the need for transformational leadership. You talk of the legislative that we are discussing now. We've come to the point where, though constitutionally allowed, the Senate President is going to gun for the executive presidency. People are jostling for offices. The governor of Central Bank also wants to be. We must put a system in place that we checkmate, going overboard. And that's why I must commend this regime for the interventions in the Electoral Act, the amended Electoral Act, that came up with a provision that some are still arguing over, that if you're a political appointee and you want to contest
you have to
at primary level, you have to resign. So, and some of them have resigned, have stepped aside, and I hope they are seeing Nigeria now the way we are seeing Nigeria, because they don't see Nigeria from office the way Nigerians see Nigeria. So when we start streamlining, and maybe someday we have a crop of legislators that we really agree that we need to build local capacity. The schools they send their children to abroad, the hospitals they send their children to, and they run to abroad, are designed by some. And that brings us to the general level that in all the sectors of our lives, we must have developmental interventions, whether it's the judicial, legislative, or executive. And again, the agricultural sector needs critical intervention to become agroeconomy. The pre-colonial era, Nigeria depended so much on agriculture. We could feed ourselves, and the colonialists came basically to tap our resources to feed their industrialization policy. And we're doing very well then. And when we said they must go, they left in a manner that we are even taking our resources to them now. And you should expect them that they may not be so interested in your getting industrialized, because they hugely depend on the fact that you must import their own produced items. And that's why we have pressure on our fiscal and whatever policy here.
Mr. Ologo, because we have to wrap up now. You saw what happened at the recent NBA conference where there was looting and all of that. How did we get to that point? What are the ways to rejig Nigeria's judicial system?
Have you read of Gen Z? In our own time, I was called to the bar in 1989. You don't even think about things like that. But things are changing. And that's why leadership should find ways of becoming more transparent, more engaging, and finding ways to attend to the needs of the people. I must let you know, this present generation is not patient with anybody. For them, the patient dog has no bone to eat. So you must escalate your own processes to suit them. So if some lawyers were fighting over bags and souvenirs or whatever, I mean, why couldn't you have translated them to them through the bars, Ikeja bar and this one, the island, and you know, there are better ways of, and it's the same thing we're having in the country. Why should I apply for NIN and it takes me 9 months? Enough to give birth to a baby that is conceived in pregnancy. So we need to fine-tune our processes to be, we talk of business friendly environment. You see, so you must fight, and that is why the younger generation may continue to, I mean, should continue to challenge the norm, but in a developmental form, and that is what we may see in the political arena. You can see a movement going on in the country now that is not dependent on, oh, politicians bring money. They say no, let's mobilize ourselves, let's go out there and drive the change, because there are 2 ways to assess change. You wait for it or you create it. Exactly, and the best way is to make it happen. So
all right, of course we hope that things are put in place to make the change happen. Thank you so much for your time on the show this morning, Jide Ologun.
Thank you too. God bless Nigeria.
God bless Nigeria. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll delve into other issues. Please stay with us.